Hey everyone, let's talk about the Final Fantasy IX units. Mainly in this review it's going to be Determined Dagger, and Kuja is just playing a side role. He is really bad, and I might as well just include him in this review because a dedicated review for a bad breaker, it feels like a waste of time. So let's get started with Determined Dagger. In base form, she is a healer. In Brave Shift, she is a lightning locked evoke limit burst finisher. Pretty much just like Tsukiko is an earth locked LB finisher in Brave Shift. One of her, or the two example abilities, are the Parried Out Thunder Flash, which is a lightning imbue for one ally, which I find rather uninteresting or even a bad decision. This should have been AoE. There is no merit to this. Yeah, it does heal, etc, etc. It's still a bad ability all around. In Brave Shift, the Judgment Bolt, though I should state, her kit is identical ability for ability in base and Brave, so there is no distinction, and this could have easily passed as a super limit burst unit. But here we are, I guess. The Judgment Bolt is Lightning Evoke, 18x, and it's just your standard. Well, it's not standard, but it does increase resistance to stat breaks, which is nice, and fills the LB gauge, which is also cool. But you have to consider her LB gauge is rather expensive, so even triple casting this, it doesn't do much. And it's chaining in Chaos Bolt Awakened frames. Now, the overall kit, she has a few things, like Please Come Back is her LB mod boost to Zidane. But Zidane not being updated, this ability is completely useless, sadly speaking. And there's Tsunami 24x, Water Evoke LB, not LB, but ability, which funnily enough she has no imperils, meaning she completely is dependent on others doing the job for her. And even at 24x, not the best, and considering that water isn't the best element in the game right now, it's really not that good. Melody of Purity, 50% general mitigation, kind of feels meh when you consider that a free unit. Ronda has 75% general mitigation pretty much for all eternity, so that doesn't do much, and her being a healer slash supportive, it doesn't feel that great. And then there's Melody of Revival, which I've seen some people being not clever enough or smart enough or intelligent enough to properly read, but let's get to the gist of it. So it heals first and foremost all allies, it revives all allies, it grants an HP barrier to all allies, but it only auto revives the caster and not the allies, so keep that in mind. The cool thing about Dagger though is the Unleashed Evocation, which is a 50% amplification field party side only, which is very cool, to Lightning Amp, Physical Magical, as well as Light. And this is really cool. Sadly, neither Light nor Lightning are meta, so that kind of makes her a little bit worse. She could have been an exceptionally good unit had Gumi not released Tsukiko 2 weeks ago, so very awkward spot for Dagger, but still amazing spot for those fights where lightning is needed, and when the boss only really is vulnerable to lightning, a Dagger will certainly come to the rescue with her amazing field. Other than that, she has a few magic spells because she's a healer, so she does have Protect Shelga amongst raise, re-raise, etc. But both Protector and Shelga are only 50% mitigation to physical slash magical. Should have been Awakened +3 for 75%, but I guess JP units, Alum doesn't know how to build decent units anymore, or at that time. So yeah. And if you've noticed, she has no amp buffs, other than the field obviously. She has no imbues, other than the single target one. She has no stat buffs, not even for herself. So that's a really, really bad unit kit design. Once again, after the YRP units last week, we are getting another very, very bad unit kit. And like I said earlier, this could have been an SLB unit for all we care. It would have been exactly the same thing. But with one upside, at least she'd have an LB buff, and at least she'd had stat buffs, because that's what happens when you unlock the SLB. So Determined Dagger would have been in a better SLB unit, but I guess being a Brave Shift unit is still better. 2 different gear sets, you can sheath things, so still better than SLB, but the only upside of SLB would have been the buffs alongside it, even though these buffs are bad. And let's get to the LBs of Dagger / Garnet. Base form, LB modifier for self, evoke, that scales with evoke but doesn't scale with morale, so no bueno for Tsukiko. Also revives all KOs allied and auto revives all allies, which is okay, I guess, for a healer. LB, but still, Sylvie does it 10 times better. The Brave Shifted LB 90x Lightning Evoke single hit, 100% scaling off of Spirit, which is kind of because we all know it's all about magic scaling, because you can then use focus magic and do a lot of damage. But all things considered, Dagger does get up to 200x LB modifier. 30x from the base form one, that's 120, and then you can use Yuna's upgraded necklace for another 80x evoke LB, and that makes 200. Now that 200 is very much needed, such that she can actually somewhat keep up with Tsukiko, even though Tsukiko has the lower LB modifier, but focus magic being a one hell of a drug, it kinda evens out, as we'll see in a few minutes. And let's check out her TMR STMR vision card. TMR 25 LB damage. It's not locked or anything, which I like, because most Trust Masters for series units are locked to the series, but this one isn't. 40 Evo damage and Evo magic, very nice. And the Super Trust Master is an accessory, 70 magic, 110 spirit, 60 Evo damage and Evo magic. And Final Fantasy IX units get 500 static, magic and spirit, which is pretty cool. I like it. It's a good Super Trust Master. And the Vision card, super good Super Trust Master for Evokers, I should say. Because the other ones, not so much, but it's still pretty good, nonetheless, for Final Fantasy IX units as well, because of the magic buff, especially BB. The Vision card, 120 magic and spirit at level 10, 50 Evo magic, Evo damage on the passives, as well as 50 LB damage, no series locks, no locks at all. So technically speaking, yeah, this is somewhat fine, until you realize it has no static magic or spirit, and thus it is sadly not that good anymore, even though the basic passives are decent. It having no static, it's bad, because if it doesn't have static these days, not worth using. So all in all, decent TMR, excellent STMR for Evoker units, and yeah, the Vision card is sadly trash. And let's briefly talk about Kuja. He is your standard breaker, could have been SLB for all we care. But again, we'll talk about that in a second. So, Fire Breaker template in base, Light Breaker template in shift, though the kit is identical between base and brave. The only difference is the limit burst. The one thing that he has, that he stole basically from Rabbanaz Travan, the new one, is that he has a 160 Light Imperil on a cooldown. That cooldown, however, unlocks on turn 3, which is coincidentally what an EX+3 SLB unit also has. But this is better, because EX+1 is already enough, so you have access to his Light LB, Light Limit Burst, but you don't technically need it, because again, kit is identical between base and brave, so you can use this, my time is almost up, at EX+0 as well. You got your 160 Light Imperil, that's good. Also the 89% Spirit Break, which is nice, I guess, but again, we do have quite a couple units with 90% breaks these days. But let's assume that we'll get a very, very good 100% Lightning Party Amp anytime soon, which I would be surprised by, but who knows. He could be pretty good. honestly. I wouldn't be that abandoned about him. It has potential, but it really needs the correct setup. And as for now, this isn't doing much. Other than that, yeah, pretty much the standard template. He does have an amp, which I do like. Even though it's just 30%, he does have an LB buff, and he has an LB modifier buff, and he has a focus magic stored into one ability, time to die everyone. It's a good ability. It's what I would have wished for a dagger to have too, minus the storing part, but Spirit Store when Gumi or /Ala. But all in all, I feel like his kit is a little bit better than Dagger's kit. It's more diverse, it does more things, but still he is missing stat buffs as well, which I find so irritating with these JP units. And I also like to point out that you really should use his TMR or STMR, because that one has 200% LB damage passive on it, so really use either one. Before we get to what the TMR and STMR is, these are the limit bursts. Base one is basically 130 fire imperil, 150x fire damage to all enemies, 24 hits, 87 defense and spirit break, so totally irrelevant. The Brave Shifted limit burst is 87 defense, 88 spirit break, 145 light imperil, which is what usually SLB units have on their base form limit burst, so he has it on his Brave limit burst, which is kinda ironic. And it's a 200x light magic damage. Please be wary, it states magic, so that's true magic damage, and you have to use magic killers, which is a little bit harder to come by, or much harder to come by in some scenarios than physical killers. So it's kind of a whatever limit burst both ways. 90 LB crystals cost thus being on the higher end of things. Not a fan of it personally. I do prefer the 60 LB cost or even 40 LB cost LBs for these trashy LB breaker template units, but I guess. Now let's talk about the TMR and Vision STMR, because the Vision card is the same as on a Dagger. So the Trustmaster, 22 defense, it's an accessory by the way, 60 magic and 20 spirit. Base stats are kind of low compared to what we've gotten with YRP last week. But the good thing for FF9 units is that there is 500 static magic on it, so not too shabby I'd say, especially for Vivi. The Super Trustmaster clothes 200 MP, 100 magic and 70 spirit, and exclusive to melee units. Those gain 150 through double hand magic. Again, excellent item for pure-hearted Vivi. So he gets some slight side grades with all of this stuff, but still, pure-hearted Vivi is very far from being meta or usable. But it's still fine if the devs decide to bring back Dark Visions / Vision World to a state where you could have just, or you could just Vivi meme them up with reflect stuff. Let's hope, because as it stands, Vivi still won't matter much, but it's fine, I guess. One day, maybe crowns in JP, but global skips crowns anyway. So, all in all, both TMR and STMR are best used on Vivi, like I mentioned. But otherwise, not so relevant and or particularly good. They do have some very niche usages, but the amount of mage units especially, that we have, you can count them on one hand probably. So all in all, one copy is enough, I'd say, but still, he's a huge skip. Now let's get to the damage calculations. Like I mentioned last week, I updated the sheet as well, so now it states the correct sheet values. I have two different sheets, one for Dark Visions / Vision World, one for Clash of Worlds. In this case, because those are JP units, we're only looking at the Dark Visions / Vision World sheet, because they both will never see play in Clash. Maybe Dagger, but such a corner case, I don't think it'll be worth it. So let's check out the build. This is Daggers. And yes, it's intended that one spot is empty, because she caps out everything with what you're seeing here. And that's pretty neat, honestly. So, yeah, I mean, you can go for more resistances, basically, with this build. And I like it, but that's what I meant. These spirit-based evokers or spirit-based damage dealers in general really need either more static or they need focus spirit to be worth a while. But then again, you'd also have to lower the LB modifier in Dagger's regard, because otherwise she'd be blowing up in terms of damage, but that'd be fine. I'd rather have focus spirit than overly high LB modifiers that don't do much regardless, because the main stat is low. So yeah, Weaver of Wishes also making a comeback for this. It's a best in slot because it has static spirit unconditionally on it, so that's nice. This is the Kuja build. Funnily enough, there should be one more instance of static on for him available. Yeah, his own boots, but he can't wear those because he has to get that 6x cap from somewhere. He can't because he has to wear his STMR, or otherwise you'll have trouble getting that max on magic through double hand, and it's kind of weird gearing him. But that's against Demon and Aquatic. He almost caps both 300 Demon, 275 Aquatic. Decent, has that innate focus magic, but all in all it won't matter. 290x LB modifier, even at 13k magic, it's bad. And this shouldn't come as a surprise. Trans Kuja is very, very low. He's pretty much Cult / Rain form level. And yeah, Determined Dagger though, really good. There is nothing to really complain about here. That 200x LB evoke modifier does its work, but still slightly below Tsukiko. Nonetheless, a very good unit when lightning is allowed. But always keep in mind, evoke damage dealers have or should technically be compared to best in case scenarios of units. All of my units are always geared towards worst case scenarios, meaning in reality Determined Dagger will be a little bit lower than what she actually is looking at or looking right now. The same applies to Tsukiko, obviously, because she's also an evoke LB damage dealer. But yeah, if lightning is the element of choice, which it probably won't because we are in an Earth meta, she is really good. And those fights that are lightning locked, she might see play, because she's very good, especially with that 50% amp field, which she herself doesn't benefit from, but all the others do, so that's really good. She's a valuable addition to the party in that regard. Kuja, on the other hand, yeah, 44.44% of Tsukiko's damage. That's not good, even for a breaker. So, Dagger's rating. Dagger could have been so much better in terms of rating. However, always keep in mind the ratings do not reflect the worth of a unit. It's more about the usage cases. So a unit with a 1 out of 10 has one very distinct niche that she excels in or at. Take for example Summer Sniper Faceless. Water hard locked magic damage, 1 out of 10, because you won't use her ever outside of water. So Dagger being a 3 out of 10 means she has a few more cases, because she has that light amp as well. So when you use light or are forced to use light, you still could use her to some degree for that light field. Granted, she has no single light damage source, so might be a very bad choice in that regard, but still there is some merit to using her. But all in all, oh, and by the way, 10 out of 10s are units that you will use constantly. Or, yeah, Roberta is one, Sylvie is one, Esther is one, for example. Those are units you always see being used. And the closer you're to a 10, the higher usage case you get. And that's why we always have Clash units or global original units such as Chizuru or, like I mentioned, Sylvie, Roberta, Kaito. They are always being used because those units are highly valuable. Now Dagger, strong damage, excellent STMR, And I also added the great amp feels because they are her unique selling point and I like them, but they do not warrant a +1 because their usage cases have been diminished due to the switch in elemental meta right now. The bad side of things is that she has a disgustingly bad kit. No self-amps, no stat buffs. Kit is identical between base and brave. She has no killer buffs. Not at all. She has a trashy vision card and absolutely no imperils. So she as a unit herself does not do anything in terms of damage. She can't amp her own damage. She can't stat buff herself. She's entirely dependent on other units doing the job for her. And that's what I really dislike about the JP meta, that units, they do not function on their own anymore. At least at that point in time of the JP meta, I think Dioses, he does function for himself, but still, these units needing someone external to do their job is bad. It's a tunnel vision unit that I really dislike, and I do fancy those role compression units that global does, and it's so much more slot efficient to use one unit for both jobs. Take Tsukiko for example. She too does not have killers, but she has everything else, and that is what makes a good unit. A unit that does not one role but potentially 2 or 3 roles, thus you have more options and more freedom to use other units to complement or just go to higher damage ceilings. JP units on the other hand, they don't even excel at one thing anymore, and that's kind of a bad sign. At least from what I've read, Alum has somewhat realized this and made the units better, but that's 6 months out. And it's going to get to the pinnacle of stupidity with Regina, who on herself is absolute trash tier. She's even worse probably than Neo Vision Cloud from 2 years ago, and she actually needs 6 slave or 5 slave units to amp her damage to somewhat half decent amounts, and even then the per unit loss is so great that she won't be worth it, and that's a spoiler for the Regina review in a few weeks. So yeah, all in all, Determined Dagger is in a very awkward spot. She could have been a superb addition to Lightning teams because we were in a Lightning meta until 2 weeks ago, but now we're not anymore. So yeah, she has no place in the meta outside those Lightning super locked fights where you're forced to use Lightning and nothing else but Lightning. So yeah, she only now functions as an STMR bait and a very niche unit. And I'm very sad about it because her base form sprite is amazing. I love it. It's a super cool design and I like the sprite and animation work of hers. And then there's Kuja, who is the huge Deadpool of this banner. He has a good TMR, STMR for Vivi memes, but that's it. The 160 Lightning Imperil and 35% Rod Imperil are good. Technically speaking, he also has a 160% human AoE killer, which is decent. I didn't mention it anywhere, but he has it. It's decent. Let's move on. The bad side of the of this are that his kit is identical between base and brave, thus me having questioning the decision of him being brave shift, but I do prefer brave shift nonetheless. But if they are doing brave shift, please, for the love of God, just don't copy the kit. He has no stat buffs outside his magic store and LB buff. Trash vision card, very low damage, and because we are below 50% of the current highest one, being Tsukiko for mages, he also gets a -1, and because he has no party support, which is another thing global units do, they are so slot efficient that they also do party support. And yeah, thus he ends up at 1 out of 10. And in his case, I'd say he's a generally bad unit. And not just because he's super niche, he won't probably even used in light teams because there are better options. So all in all, Kuja, all around bad unit, no saving grace in the current meta, as light is one of the worst elements until we get that 100% AoE light amp. And he will maybe used in the catastrophe trial because that is weak to light. However, With Tsukiko being around and having 160 total imperil, no, 150 total imperil to light, 120 plus 30, yeah, 150, you probably won't end up using Kuja and instead use someone else to actually dish out damage such that the 30% higher total imperil doesn't end up mattering at all. So yeah, easiest skip. You don't need either unit of this banner, technically speaking, unless you're going for top 10 Dark Visions. And even then, it's all about the TMR/STMRs. And that's the review for today. Thank you all for watching. We'll see each other on Thursday for some Flammy pulls. So, see you then. Bye bye.